Three pretty important games in college football next season between the Big Ten and the SEC. Those three games are Ohio State, Texas, Oklahoma, Michigan, and then Minnesota and Mississippi State. That's one that some people are not going to pay enough attention to. But I think for the depth argument, especially with Kirby Smart talking about how difficult Starkville is to play at, wish the game was at Starkville, but it's in Minnesota. These are going to be important games with all kind of their own talking points when it comes to the Big Ten. Of course, the Big Ten won the past three national championships. You still get people who say the depth of the SEC, yada, yada, yada. It's a whole talking point. Go on Twitter. You'll get filled with it all if you just make one tweet about the two, about the two conferences. But at this point, Doug, what are your thoughts going into, let's start with Ohio State at Texas, week 2, all three of these games in week 2, Ohio State at Texas. We saw what happened last season. A lot of people picked Texas. Ohio State's defense dominated that game. Arch Manning was not ready to face them yet. This season, he has some more starts under his belt. Ohio State's defense loses, I believe, it's 8 starters from last season, and including their incredible Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, guys like that. Is this the year that, Texas, being at Texas, could possibly get back at Ohio State after losing them the past 2 times?
Yeah, so we did it. We're doing over on the Bill and Doug show opponent breakdowns week by week for Ohio State. We've already started that. So we did Texas last week. We had a Texas beat writer over on our Substack. We wrote all about Texas. They don't have a ton of guys back either. I think they might have 7 or 8 returning starters. They obviously got an influx in the portal. They have a great left tackle back. They have Arch Manning back. They have new skill beyond that, obviously headlined by Cam Coleman, the Auburn receiver who transferred in. They added 2 running backs. They added 2 pieces on the offensive line. Their secondary is a little iffy, probably. They have some good guys up front. I think that game's a toss-up. I don't think it matters that much home and road. Ohio State's history of their big non-conference matchups is like they lose at home in these games all the time. I picked Texas to win last year and was wrong with that, but it's like Ohio State in the past they lost to Virginia Tech at home. They've lost to USC at home. They lost to Oklahoma at home, but they went and won, and they had beaten Oklahoma on the road the year before in 2016. So I do think, the main part of this is, will both teams still make the college football playoff for Ohio State, Texas? I say yes. I also said yes last year, and that was wrong. But you're going to get squeezed. The loser will start getting squeezed on the wiggle room right away. So this game does matter, because if Texas loses and you're going to start a conversation about Sark not winning big games. I think whatever it has, 8 losses in the past 3 years, and 5 of them are to Ohio State and Georgia. They can't get over the top. They can't beat the teams that they have to beat to define themselves. And then Ohio State, with the tough schedule that it has, a lot of people are staring at their schedule that includes Indiana, that includes Oregon, that includes USC, that includes Iowa, that includes Michigan at the end of the year, and thinking about the possibility of 9-3. And so if they are 1-1, then all of a sudden, it's not panic time, but it's okay, you've lost a little bit of your wiggle room. So I do think it probably comes down to the quarterbacks. And then that's one of those where in situations like this, now Ryan Day, the quarterback guy for Ohio State, has won games like this, and Sark, the quarterback guy for Texas, has not won as many games like this, right? Ohio State has these 2 recent wins over Texas, one in the semi, one to open last year. I think it's a coin toss. I think we have to see some of the position battles in August, how things pop. How do Bo Jackson and Isaiah West look for Ohio State at running back? How does Ohio State, develop that second pass catcher to complement Jeremiah Smith? What does that look like? The Ohio State offensive line, with all the guys they have back, they had a couple injuries in the spring. Do they look healthy and good? And then you mentioned all the guys they've lost on defense. How much of a drop-off? It's going to be some degree of drop-off for the Ohio State defense, but how much? But there's also other holes that Texas has to fill too. So I don't think you could pick that game right now. And I think it really matters. And I think it is defining for both teams, but it's also defining to what you're talking about here, this this Big Ten SEC argument. You're how can you represent that better than Ohio State versus Texas right now? So great game. I'll be there. I'm looking forward to it, but I don't know now, at the moment, I don't have a handle on who's going to have an edge there, other than I think it's a coin flip.
Yeah, my default right now is that I've compared Steve Sarkisian to James Franklin a number of times. So if I'm going to stay true to my comparison there, I'm gonna have to go with Ohio State.
I do think the two, like it's the path in the woods, right? And so there's enough with where Texas is right now, is they have a chance to be 2024 Ohio State. Ryan Day won his national title in year 6 at Ohio State. This is Sark's year 6 at Texas. There were guys, obviously, that 2024 Ohio State team guys stayed. Like you had more back than Texas has back, but yet Texas has like some really important guys back, Arch Manning and Colin Simmons and Trevor Gooseby and things like that, right? So I think there's some comparisons there. But then last year's team like that was Penn State. So there was that natty or bust label that got put on Ohio State in 2024, partly because one of Ohio State's players said it. Ohio State, I think, didn't love it, but it's like, and we did something back then of like, if you go through, like, who is the most natty or bust team in each year of college football going back the past 12 or 15 years, let's say, right? And then did they natty or did they bust? So we did that exercise, I think, last year, but I think in 2024, it was clearly Ohio State, they nattied. I think in 2025, it was Penn State, they busted. And I think that team in 2026 is Texas. So he might be James Franklin, but also Ryan Day was kind of like James Franklin until he wasn't, until he won, and they won 4 straight games against great teams in that playoff run. And so, do you want to bet your life on Steve Sarkisian right now that they're going to get this done? No, you don't. It's an odd place to be, but we have seen other coaches sort of come up to that precipice. Jim Harbaugh, for a time, was like Jim Harbaugh couldn't get over the top and win the games he needed to win, and then they did. Right? I remember Clemson used to be like, hey, Clemsoning was a thing where it was like, oh, Clemson means like you're fake good. And then Dabo won multiple national titles, right? So I think that's a fair assessment by you of Sark, but we've also seen similar coaches then sort of shed that label. And so I don't know. Like, I think there's like a 50% chance that Sark is Ryan Day, and I think there's a 50% chance he's James Franklin. But really interesting to try to figure out what's going to happen, right? I'm looking forward to it.
Say that the fun thing is we get to find out this season. Yeah. So I would put Oregon and Notre Dame in the same categories a little bit as Ohio State 2024, with all that Oregon's bringing back on defense and some of those too. But I think you're right. I think it's Texas is probably the most, if not Oregon or Notre Dame, and might just be in the eyes of the beholder there. The next game, Big Ten and SEC on week 2, is Michigan and Oklahoma. Of course, this game now going to Michigan instead of at Oklahoma. It was at Oklahoma last year. Big noon kickoff for this one. So that'll, I definitely get every single Big Ten fan very excited. I know Ohio State fans are, because that means they won't be playing at noon. So, but I mean, they're out of Texas anyway, so ESPN is going to have the game. But what are your thoughts on Michigan, Oklahoma? Bryce Underwood coming into year 2. He's got more experience this one. Michigan's going to have the star running back, Savion Hyder. Kyle Whittingham's first big game against an SEC opponent while he's in the Big Ten. I mean, what are you looking at there?
Yeah, again, to go back and look at those preseason quarterback lists from a year ago, man, people were high on John Mateer. Woo, baby. They thought
he was like a Heisman favorite at one point. Yeah.
Everything that Fernando Mendoza is what people were acting like John Mateer might be. And we know that he was good, and then he got hurt, right? And then he tried to come back and at the end of the year, and he was kind of playing hurt and that kind of thing. But man, like, you give national media a transfer quarterback in the SEC, and they cannot contain themselves. This is a guy, they ignored him at Washington State, and it's like, oh, John Mateer, we've never seen anything like it. It is interesting now that we have seen the fallout of the Sharon Moore situation. Was he like checking his phone on the sideline during games? Like, well, how much was this guy spending much time coaching football? Like, there is this, it's like, I just want to make sure I'm getting a good 40 hours out of my head coach, and you might see Michigan take a jump. So like how what Sharon Moore apparently was focused on is like, how did Michigan win more than 3 games any of these years? So there's a professionalism, I think, with Kyle Whittingham. I think with Jay Weber as a defensive coordinator, with Jason Beck as the offensive coordinator, I think like there's just like some stuff of like, okay, I think they're going to be more businesslike. And again, I mean, we've all done these shows like over the years. It's like the 10 best coaches in college football. Kyle Whittingham was on everybody's lists for years and years and years and years. And it's like, well, what if he was a place that had like what was a step up from what Utah was? And Utah was great, but like that's what he has now. So I obviously it's a great opportunity for Michigan. It's May. I don't have a handle on Michigan because there just seemed to be a foundation of like incompetence now. Maybe you saw it in the moment, but now in hindsight, we can see it. And now that's not what this regime is going to be about. And then they got some dudes. I think they have some dudes, right? Jordan Marshall and Savion Hyder at running back, Andrew Marsh back at receiver. And the idea, and we do this all the time. We all do this all the time. That there were a lot of true freshman quarterbacks who played last year. It's like really interesting to think about, like you're going to bring in a guy in, you may as well play him, but like Bear Bachmeier at BYU and Jaron Kiawe Sangapolatelli at Cal and Malik Washington at Maryland and Bryce Underwood at Michigan. And it's like those guys put it out there, the good and the bad, right? But if Bryce Underwood just did not play last year, if he was like Keelan Russell, who was the number 2 quarterback in that class and Bryce Underwood was 1, and then like you didn't see the warts. Right? Would people be higher on Bryce Underwood if he hadn't played? Because like, man, this guy's number 1 recruit in his class. Second-year guy, just played a couple garbage time snaps last year, but now he's ready to go. I think we might be he wasn't drafted in our top 15 quarterback draft, right? You and I, we talked about all the quarterbacks in the Big Ten. We didn't spend much time on Bryce Underwood. But if he had never played and he was the number 1 recruit in his class and he was a sophomore and he's a second-year player, he's ready to let it go, we probably would be talking about him more. But it's actually obviously better for him in Michigan that he has a gazillion snaps under his belt and a full year of starting. So I don't know. It's certainly possible that we are tremendously underrating Bryce Underwood. And with better coaching and a year under his belt, he's going to make a huge leap. That's certainly on the table. It would be huge for Michigan to win that game. And I think at the moment I would pick Michigan to win that game because I do think they're just going to have their stuff together more than they've had it.
I tend to agree, and I think that Jason Beck is going to be huge for Bryce Underwood. Yep. We saw the improvement of what was it? Was it Dupree? I forget what the Utah quarterback's name was last season, but
Devin Dampier.
Dampier, that's right. It was. Dupree is I think a running back at Wisconsin. So I got the Wisconsin running back in my mind, but not the Utah quarterback. It tells you how much I'm into the Big Ten, I guess. But I'm with you. I think that this Bryce Underwood situation is going to, be a big talking point, even though maybe it's not getting the recognition right now. He's got to be better than he was last season. Mm-hmm. He's got to be better than he was last season. An actual offensive coordinator. I'm not trying to take shots at Chip Lindsey here, but, Chip Lindsey was somebody who did well with Drake May, but he also kind of regressed under Drake May. And Jason Beck, he's got a pretty good track record of quarterbacks. And like you said, you got a head coach here who's not checking his phone for, models and stuff like that at halftime. So, which sounds really prestigious, but once you dig deeper, it's not very prestigious at all. So, let's get into the last game here. Minnesota versus Mississippi State. This one at Minnesota. Man, Doug, I know you're with me on PJ Fleck. He's underrated by a lot of people out there. I think he's a better coach than people give him credit for. He's got Drake Lindsey in year 2. Darius Taylor coming back. Yes, Mississippi State has Jeff Lebby coming back as their head coach. And so both these two teams, neither of them are going to be national championship contenders, but this is kind of the depth of the two conferences that has been the talking point as, which conference is the better one. If you ask me, this might be the most important game in the season between a Big Ten and SEC team to kind of talk about those talking points and see who comes out on top. What's your takes going into this Minnesota-Mississippi State game?
Yeah, been a Drake Lindsey fan, obviously. Agree with what you said about PJ Fleck. I mean, the one thing about Minnesota is it has not won these non-conference games in the way that they probably should. They had the North Carolina loss a couple years ago, right? That was at home when the Carolina quarterback got hurt. Yep. They lost at Cal, I
last
think.
year.
Yeah,
at
like
Cal.
just like these games, it's like they should, like you get excited, like Minnesota, like go show us something, and then it turns out that Minnesota then during the course of the year is competitive, but it's like then go beat North Carolina and go beat Cal. They're doing a good job of scheduling teams on the correct tier, and then they don't get it done. So like I think you have to also have to put that on PJ Fleck as well. I'm not going to pretend I know much about Mississippi State, but I do think in your bigger picture question, the SEC has abandoned all pretense of pretending that the top of the SEC is as good as the top of the Big Ten because everybody knows it's not true. So back in the 14 playoff day when Nick Saban was being the best head coach in college football history, but like was elevating the entire conference in a way that really mostly 90% was about one guy in one program, but we acted like the whole SEC was good. And back then, when it was just a 14 playoff, you wanted to be top heavy. Top heavy was good. You want great teams that are going to make the college football playoff. And then guess what? The SEC champ always made the 14 college football playoff. Guess what? The Big Ten champ always didn't. Not always didn't, but it wasn't a guarantee. Think about that now. It's like you have a 14 playoff. Oh, who won the Big Ten? I didn't get in. It's like, what? Ridiculous, but that happened back then. So when it was advantageous to be top heavy, then the SEC was top heavy and they wanted to puff that up. Now the Big Ten's better at the top and the playoff has expanded. So now the SEC acts because they don't have a choice. They can't pretend that their best is better than the Big Ten. It's not. Mm-hmm. So they have to lean on the depth argument. And the depth argument is why Greg Sankey thinks they should get 7 teams in the playoff and all that crap, right? Did you watch Alabama, Oklahoma last year? Right? Was that a good game? Did anyone think that was good football? Like you run
I didn't think so, man.
So they're mid. They're mid. I said it all last year. The SEC is mid. The SEC is mid. The SEC is mid. And then you saw Bama. You saw Texas A&M. You saw Oklahoma. You saw these playoff teams, and they were mid. Georgia was pretty mid. Right. And if the bracket had gone a little different, it's like, okay, well, you got Georgia, Ole Miss in a quarterfinal. So they had to get a team in a semi. Lucky for them. Or the SEC might not have had anybody in the semis. I think this year is the year that the SEC depth argument falls apart because I actually think the Big Ten, I think the SEC is going to be really top heavy this year. And I think that Georgia and Texas have a chance to be really good and sort of like be absolute national title contenders and be sort of what Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana was last year, right? Like at the top. But I think it's 2 teams. And then tell me who the third best team in the SEC is going to be. Is it going to be Lane Kiffin at LSU?
LSU maybe.
Bama's throwing money at Kalen DeBoer to try to make themselves feel better, right? Like Bama, the balloon has popped. Good luck. Good luck with Bama with that trying to make that your third best team. Lane Kiffin's already making excuses why they're not going to be good. Is John Sumrall at Florida or Alex Golish or Auburn or any of these like new first-year coaches from the American who are here to save the SEC going to be good right away? Is Vanderbilt going to be good with a freshman quarterback? Like, who's going to be good? I actually kind of think Kentucky might be good. I already have my little bet down for Kentucky to make the playoff. But if we're talking about Kentucky being a playoff team, that's telling you that the SEC is not very deep. So I do think this is the last, it's like the last stand of the SEC is like, we might not be good at the top, but our 8th best team is better than your 8th best team. And I think this will be the year that the Big Ten disproves that as well. And then the SEC will be left with nothing. They'll have no more arguments to make. They will be a puffed up fraud of a conference with no recourse. So I think we're already there. I already think the Big Ten depth is much closer to the SEC depth than somebody like Kirby Smart would tell you. I think this year is the year we get proof.
That sounds like a dream come true to me. So if we could just get that to happen, that would be glorious. If you want to track Doug's bet there for Kentucky to make the playoffs on FanDuel, Kentucky currently sits at plus 2,000. And for all the people that said I was crazy to pick UCLA as a dark horse to possibly make the playoff, plus 2,000 for UCLA as well. So,
No, there's some good Big Ten dark horses. UCLA is a good dark horse. Penn State with their easy schedule is a good dark horse. I like USC, but USC kind of has a tougher schedule. But, if you're going to be good, then go beat people. So I do think I would also make a bet that the Big Ten will get more teams in the playoff than the SEC this year. If you can get FanDuel to make that a prop that you can do.
I cannot. Well, you maybe get a prop on that, but
yeah.
You
got to make a special request. Tell them what's up.
Yeah.
Tell them the Big Ten Huddle. The Big Ten Huddle special wants a special bet. Big Ten teams in the playoff ahead of SEC teams. I think we could be looking at like 5-3. Because I do think, like, you look at Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, USC, they're good teams with a tough schedule. And then I think there's like this separate Penn State path that they're kind of like on the frontage road where they're kind of not really playing anybody. And they're just like Matt Campbell's driving along, going 10-2 and being like, put us in the playoff too. And I think that could happen. And I think you might wind up with like 4 from the group of really good Big Ten teams who are beating each other up. And then also Penn State. And then meanwhile, it's Texas, Georgia, and then tell me who else. And I saw somebody say Oklahoma in the chat. That certainly could be. But like Texas, Georgia, and then tell me who else. And then beyond that, tell me 4th. Because I felt like the league blew up last year, right? Like these programs are a mess. And so they're mid.
Yep. Hey, and Ulta has a ringing endorsement here. Hey, I like this Doug guy. Well, if you like this Doug guy, you can go check him out over at Bill and Doug. He does a great job there. And before we get done here, I do want to also highlight Ulta's comment here. We're talking about PJ Fleck, that he wins bowl games. So you know what? Maybe if we just put some like Duke Mayo on the sideline or something, Doug, for that Mississippi State game, convince him it's a bowl game. We might be looking at a Big Ten win over the SEC there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'll take it. And again, this is one of those, as you talk about this, the SEC 9 non-conference games going to that. That's great. It's about time. Mandating a 10th game against another power conference, right? I think the Big Ten should do the same. Tony Petitti should mandate that. Make sure that Indiana and Penn State and programs like that are playing at least one good non-conference game. But I all along would also, I would be willing to have both conferences go back to 8 non-conference games in favor of a Big Ten SEC challenge if we lock that in. Because I understand, I would get why maybe the coaches wouldn't want to do 9 and then a Big Ten SEC challenge where you're guaranteed that. Because if you're playing, your conference commissioner says you have to play another Power 4 team. Well, it can be a lesser ACC team or Big 12 team or something like that, right? But if right now you were talking about Mississippi State, Minnesota, and it was within the SEC Big Ten Challenge, and we were sprinkling all of that out through September, we were playing 3 or 4 games a weekend for the whole month of September and tracking. That's a point for the Big Ten. That's a point for the SEC. And I know it's been discussed, but like it should be discussed as like the forefront of all this stuff. It would absolutely blow the doors off the sport. People would be locked in for the entire month of September, and you would have more stakes to a Mississippi State Minnesota game than you ever could imagine. You would have people locked in for Northwestern Vanderbilt at the highest level. You would have people locked in for Florida, Wisconsin, because it's a point in the SEC Big Ten Challenge, and it's just sitting there. And to have the ACC and the Big 12 do the same thing at the same time, like it's so great, and I hope I live long enough to see something like that. But it would sure help discussions like this when we're trying to figure out who's better, the SEC or the Big Ten. Play the challenge, see what's up.
And they couldn't use this excuse that Dave points out here. If Minnesota beats Mississippi State, SEC fans would just say, doesn't matter, Mississippi State is awful. Yeah, they'll find another SEC team to prop up there. You're exactly right there. You're exactly right. All right. Hey, I already kept you over, Doug. We appreciate so much you coming in here and talking some Big Ten versus SEC stuff with us. We have more people in the chat now, so go ahead and let the people who are in the chat watching the show now, let them know where they can find your content at.
Yeah, thanks again for the invite. You can read us and get the 2 subscriber shows a week on Substack, Bill and Doug, osu.substack.com. But definitely do this. Wherever you find podcasts, wherever you on YouTube, come find us. The Bill and Doug Show, Ohio State content there, a national Big Ten kind of show at the end of the week. And then that's where you can find out as we build out sort of another version of our national discussion. We'll let you know over there. But we're previewing Ohio State opponents. We just had Kent State coach Mark Carney on the Bill and Doug Show with us on Tuesday, and he broke down Kent State, who is coming to visit Ohio State in week 3. So That's the kind of stuff we're doing.
My co-host always gets jokes that he's a Kent State fan because the only college football game that he's been to cover was Penn State and Kent State one year. So he's got a Kent State hat and everything. So I'll definitely tell Zach about that show and make sure he goes watch it.
I see Billy Tuesday here saying, great point, Doug, but I thought of it a while ago. I proposed an SEC Big Ten challenge, and I sent letters to the SEC and Big Ten commissioners, and then I played out the SEC Big Ten challenge on like my PlayStation and wrote about it at the Cleveland Plain Dealer in like 2009. That I wrote to the commissioners and said, like, you should do this. It would be awesome. And I made the whole schedule. This is what it looks like. So I'm glad everybody's on board. But if I was the commissioner of the Big Ten, we would have had this thing running 17 years ago. So
I think I'll take the guy that played out the entire challenge on the PlayStation there. That's commitment there, Doug. We appreciate it.
It would be 2:00 in the morning and the computer would be playing out LSU versus Nebraska. And I would just be like sitting there being like, what is going to happen in this game? I have to write this and go to bed. So yeah, it was quite a time.
Love it. Love it.